Hello and welcome to Recyclist. I'm your host, Eric Provost, and I am being joined today by a very special guest. I'm incredibly excited to get this man on the show. We have a lot to talk about today, so help me welcome to the show right now the senior consultant for Geosyntec, Dr. Marc Rogoff. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it, Eric.
I am too, and I'm sure for a lot of the people listening to this podcast, a lot of the people within the industry are fairly familiar with Geosyntec and what you guys do over there. But for those who might not be familiar for whatever reason, could you describe your company and your position within it, sir?
Well, I'm a senior consultant, and I'm in a practice area called Solid Waste Advisory Services. So, pretty much what we do is consulting for both private and public entities on all sorts of solid waste issues, from collection to transfer stations to waste to energy. Geosyntec is this large geotechnical company. They do a lot of obviously very high tech big dam design and all sorts of things like that. But I'm in this little service area that does solid waste.
Yeah, and you guys have a couple big projects that you mentioned to me about. You have something going on in Anchorage, a couple projects going on in Florida, correct?
Yes, the one in Anchorage is something that I've been kind of focused on the last 6 or 7 years. Um, they're moving forward. I started with a feasibility study back just before the pandemic, and which basically said that their uh, all the ramifications of to implement a project kind of made sense for them. And they had a change of mayors after the pandemic, and they're going to be moving forward to implement a 1,000 ton per day waste to energy facility, mass burn. So I'm kind of excited. We're in the midst of like hiring other consultants to be part of our team and trying to get other entities within the Anchorage area, such as there's a big military base there and the electric utility to be part of a team member of our consortium for the project. So it's pretty interesting right now.
Yeah, and the project's down in Florida?
The projects in Florida, we have two fairly large transfer stations that we're in the midst of designing for the city of Lakeland and also the city of Northport. And it transfer stations seem to be kind of like this emerging type of project recently because a lot of entities, we represent a lot of entities that collect their own trash, trying to look for some other opportunities where they would dispose of it and hopefully make more economic sense for them.
Yeah. Well, I wish you luck with both of those, especially the Anchorage project. You said you've been working on it since before the pandemic, so I'm sure you've got a lot of skin in the game in that regard. And it sounds like it would be a huge boon to the surrounding community. I do want to get into kind of the main reason why we wanted to bring you on the show. We are recording this several weeks prior to the first ever Archon for SWANA. And if you're able to make it out the week of November 11th through the 16th, Columbus, Ohio, make sure to join us. But it was announced, Dr. Rogoff, that you are in fact going to be the recipient of SWANA's Robert L. Lawrence Distinguished Service Award, which is, for those who don't know, the association's highest accolade in recognition of service to the solid waste industry and the general public. Now, you mentioned on your own social media, you said, quote, "It is the culmination of many years of hard work in the industry on behalf of thousands of clients in 48 states and 45 different countries." I'm interested to know, how did you find out that you were going to be receiving this award?
Well, I got a phone call kind of out of the blue when I was actually not even home, and I was told that my application that my supervisor put in for me Mr. Tom Ramsey,
Yes.
um, was accepted, and everybody was looking forward to the award ceremony at the SWANA conference.
What was your initial kind of gut emotional reaction? Were you
Well, I've been a member of SWANA since probably 1981.
yes, 81, yep.
Yeah, I moved to Florida at that time. I was responsible for implementing a waste to energy project, and our chapter, the Florida chapter, was just being developed, and I joined. I joined, and it's been kind of I would say a labor of love over the last 40 some odd years of being a SWANA member, and I've done all sorts of things for both our chapter, the Florida Sunshine chapter, and also on the national level.
Yeah, here just some of the highlights. Uh, According to an official statement from SWANA in regards to your receiving this award, at the international level, you have been a member of the International Board Policy Committee and chair of the Waste to Energy Collection Transfer and Ad Hoc Technical Committees. So I imagine those were all incredibly easy, laid back jobs that didn't require any hard work or or anything whatsoever.
A lot of hard work and a lot of trying to get a lot of folks, to be part of those groups.
Yeah, and specifically when it comes to waste to energy, obviously there's been a lot of stuff that has come up in recent years with this adoption of biomethane, renewable natural gas, and stuff like that. And landfills are very much like ground zero for a lot of that. They're no longer just simply places where, people leave trash. Landfills now have recyclable collection services, they have compostable material collection services, but now they also create these renewable energy, so much so that our CEO of Diamond Scientific, Ramon Rivera, has even argued that they should be called resource reclamation centers at this point. With all
Agreed.
of you, yeah,
Agreed.
with all of your experience within this field, um, I wanted to ask you several questions and kind of pick your brain on your veteran experience in this. First of all, what do you think is the most significant technological or regulatory change that you've witnessed in your time within the industry, and how do you think that that has changed or maybe even fundamentally altered how the industry operates?
Well, when I entered the industry in the early '80s, there literally were no real regulations for landfilling of solid waste. And you just looking at just our state alone, we had a lot of they call it leaking landfills. We had a lot of public outcry about the pollution that was resulting from that, and we had all sorts of regulatory meetings, task forces that were developed to develop what they call the liner rule in Florida, and because our groundwater is so high, and it's just very difficult to landfill obviously without liners.
Yeah. So the liner you think is probably one of the uh, probably one of the biggest advancements that has been made in that regard.
Definitely, definitely.
Are there any others that stand out to you?
Well, also if you look at the early '80s, there was no landfill gas regulations, and if you just look at the new landfills that are being designed, they're designed with high tech liners, landfill gas collection systems.
Hmm.
Even some facilities will have a landfill gas to energy facilities where they will actually produce natural gas from the methane that's generated by the landfills.
Yeah, and as much as you've seen that become more adopted over the past few years, and companies coming out and introducing entirely brand new systems for collecting methane and scrubbing these gases, creating these renewable fuels now. How do you think that the waste to energy sector is fitting into the future of not just waste management, but the energy sector at large?
Well, I mean, just the community that I was working for, Hillsborough County, we implemented we had a landfill that was essentially did not have a liner, so we had a lot of pollution that resulted from that. And ultimately, it was closed. But we knew that eventually the county needed to move into something else, and that was waste to energy. And so, over a 3 year period in the early '80s, the county moved to implement a 1,600 ton per day mass burn waste to energy facility, very similar to very similar to adjacent community in Pinellas County, which had a very large one. And there are not, like now 9 waste energy facilities across the state of Florida. Yesterday, uh, the board of the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County um, announced that they were moving forward with a second waste to energy facility. It is about $1.3 billion. So these things are expensive, but they provide long term stability in solid waste systems.
And you've dealt very intimately with many of these projects over the years. What are some of the big concerns or challenges or questions that keep coming up for you?
Well, obviously, it's an expensive technology.
Yeah.
Uh, and you're obviously doing you're spending all of your capital up front. And like in this case, Palm Beach County is spending $1.3 billion for all the capital needs for that facility, versus being doing a landfill where you're doing the capital costs maybe over a 50-year period. So there's a lot of upfront costs which are sometimes difficult to overcome. Uh,
Mhm.
but also there's the perception that we're burning garbage, and what's coming out of that stack from a waste energy plant. And so all of the new facilities in the United States meet worldwide standards for air pollution control. So it's all the things such as carbon monoxide and CO2 and sulfur dioxide and the like. They're all basically new standards that were adopted over the last, I guess, the last 20 years under the Air Pollution Control Act amendments. So it's trying to convince the public that this is probably the best environmentally suited solution to waste management.
Yeah. And in addition to your work with Geosyntec, you also worked for a number of years for SCS engineers. I can't even imagine the number of these types of projects that you've seen in your time in the industry. Has the obviously the upfront costs are probably going to be the biggest hitching point for a lot of people. Have you ever seen anybody hesitate because of the potential complexity of the system that you're talking about when it comes to gas collection and gas scrubbing and trying to fit stuff into the pipeline and get it into the
Well,
energy grid?
the aim is to find a good consultant that's experienced and has qualified professionals
Hmm.
that could get you over the hump to overcome the technology obstacles and to move forward with a project. And there's a lot I've done probably over almost 1,000 projects across the United States, and it's experience. I think you really have to try to find the most experienced professionals to move your project forward.
Where do you think are there any states that stick out to you as being particularly easy or friendly toward these type of projects?
Florida is has more waste energy facilities than pretty much any state, and it's primarily because it's It's difficult to site landfills because of the high groundwater tables, although landfills have been cited. Um, and I think people over the last, 30 years or so, since these projects have been implemented, are kind of used to them. I mean, I think there was a survey done by one of the local counties that asked the question, uh, what is that facility down there on that other side of the road? And, people said, well, that's an office complex, an office building, and it really was a waste energy facility. The only times that people kind of knew that there was trash as part of the process was when the garbage trucks entered the facility, came off the main road.
And when it comes to legislation specifically, have has that ever brought up any concerns or any major challenges for you?
Um, Yeah, I mean, uh, you know, the, in the early '80s, there was a lot of concern about what they call flow control, being able to direct the waste to
Yeah.
either waste to energy facility or a landfill. And I think for the most part, we've worked out all of the legal ramifications of that, dealing with that, and then also the permitting issues, with state and the federal EPA regulations. We now have a pretty good baseline of how these projects operate and how they can be permitted.
And when it comes to any type of advice that you would give to people trying to look into waste to energy projects from their own, I know you said make sure to find the right consultant to get you over the hump. Do you think there's any other vital advice or information that you think for people starting off that would be good to know?
Well, I've written widely about this. There's like a lot
Yes.
of papers out there. There's actually I worked on 13 different projects while I was with another engineering company, HDR Engineering. And so I kind of distilled down, that there's some basic building blocks for these projects, having enough waste, committed for the project long term. Um, Having a viable site, uh, being able to connect in with the grid, the electric grid, to be able to sell your power, um, and also being able to convince your decision makers: is this a facility that we want to own, or we want to operate ourselves, or we want to have a private company own and operate it potentially, or just operate the facility. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, but it's tried and tested now. I think
Hmm.
there's quite a number of facilities in the United States. There's actually, I think, about 80 operating facilities, and there's probably thousands worldwide. There's probably like 500 in Europe, and China has almost 500 themselves. So the technology is viable and it does work.
Yeah. And speaking of all the writing that you've done, I certainly wanted to touch on that because you have certainly done a lot of writing, hundreds of articles, and something that I'm very interested in just touching on very quickly are the textbooks. You've actually written quite a few textbooks on the industry. I'm just looking through Amazon right now. They're available here. Several textbooks in the waste to energy line, several editions of that. You've written approaches to implementing solid waste recycling facilities, solid waste recycling and processing, planning of solid waste recycling facilities and programs, and several others. What is the process of trying to coalesce these decades of information and
Well,
experience and knowledge into projects and textbooks like these?
well, a lot of it comes from just being able to write articles and then collecting the articles together and trying to make sense of it in a textbook. One of the things that I always regretted was not being able to work full time in a university setting. I went into the consulting line pretty much straight out of school, and I always made a promise to my major professor at Michigan State that I would continue to write, and I enjoy it. It's something that has been worthwhile in my career. It's amazing to the amount of obviously being able to generate work if you're a consultant to write papers and get people later on, maybe a couple of years later, that call you up and say, well, I really have this problem, can you help me out?
Have you ever heard of your textbooks being used? Has anybody mentioned to you when they've been used in a university setting for a class
um,
or anything?
in some courses at some universities that they have. I've noticed that a lot of consulting firms have bought them. We're currently, even in Anchorage, we had a number of the other consultants bought the textbook just so everybody's on the same page.
Any of those calls happen to come from University of Michigan or Cornell?
Yeah, I get a listing, maybe a couple of times a year that shows me where the books are getting sold, and yeah, it's actually all over the world, and it's actually frightening. Somebody in Indonesia is reading this textbook.
And I mentioned Cornell because, of course, that's where you got your master's degree from. Um, so I was just wondering if you were ever able to get back to that alma mater and have a full circle moment like that. Is that something that you'd still like to maybe pursue? Is working at a university and maybe
Well, I
implementing your
did
own
that.
textbooks yourself?
No, I did that for a few jobs back. I actually worked for the University of South Florida and
Oh,
the
okay,
Institute of Government, so I did have some team teaching that I did in the engineering school, and that was pretty interesting.
wonderful. Yeah, how was that experience like?
It was very interesting, I would say. And it's trying to convince people that this is an industry or trade that they might consider if they're a civil engineering student.
And when it comes to, all the writing and a lot of your work with Swana, a lot of that basically comes down to trying to educate people and trying to advocate for the, more widespread adoption of, waste to energy projects and stuff like that. How much of a role do you think that organizations like Swana, yourself, and other like-minded groups, how much impact do you feel like you guys have had over the past couple decades in trying to help shape the industry and where it's at today?
Well, I've known in the past, in my early years of SWANA, as some of the regulations were getting implemented. I,
Hmm.
I this is like a couple of executive directors before our recent director, Amy. Um, we testified, quite a number of us that were on the committee level testified before congressional hearings, regulatory meetings, and and we did, I think, a fairly good job of pushing some of the regulations forward.
Are there any specific regulations that kind of stand out to you as benchmarks of your career or particularly difficult fights?
Um, yeah, the in Florida we had a, a, a difficulty in getting the correct value for the energy generated by waste energy facilities, and I think it's a still a continuing battle with the Florida Public Service Commission to try to get a reasonable rate for the power that's generated from these plants. So it's a case in point, I guess, is trying to move those things forward.
Looking at the industry where it's at right now, what do you think from a regulatory standpoint might be the biggest help? Is there anything specifically from legislators that you'd like to see? Anything that you think might really help expand the industry or expand its capabilities?
Or there was a push a few years ago to allow the EPA to offer different type of grant programs. to not only communities, cities, and counties, but also the states. So there's a lot of what they call these Swiffer grants that have been issued to various communities and various states, and I think a lot of that value, and that may be, helping a county or city or a state develop waste composition studies and things of that nature. I know that our firm recently completed a full blown waste composition study for the entire island of Puerto Rico.
Oh, wow.
We actually sunk into the various landfills around the state, and came up with recommendations based on the data that we got out of the composition uh, studies, recommendations as far as where they need to move in recycling and in landfill design.
So, and well, what kinds of insights can you glean? I mean, I know you just mentioned, recycling and the position of landfills. What other types of insights can you glean from studies like that, and how important do you think that those are for communities in terms of planning out their own waste collection or waste to energy itineraries?
Well, a lot of those studies can give you a pretty good idea about opportunities to increase recycling rates in the community.
Hmm.
You look at obviously the amount of plastics and paper and things of that nature, and a lot of communities have changed the way that they collect the solid waste, and look for opportunities to educate the public about how to increase recycling.
I'll just tell them to read your textbook, right? That's basically all it boils down to. You just
Yeah,
tell
it
them
could be.
to.
Could be, but the data does actually tell you a lot, and it also tells you a little bit about uh, how people are doing their job of recycling. There's been a move recently to reduce the amount of contamination in
Hmm.
the recycling bins, and you really have to have the data to see um, what the problems are so that you can educate the public.
Do you think that's a pretty fundamental step that most communities or cities should take if they're looking to plan stuff out long term like that?
Definitely. I mean, it's a definite thing. And one of the things that's going to be on this waste to energy implementation in Anchorage is actually doing a full blown waste composition study to get an idea of what's in the waste,
Hmm.
what's the fuel content of the waste, and how they can improve their recycling rates to reduce the amount of waste that actually gets incinerated.
Well, just for anybody who might be listening to this, I'll go ahead and ask what I feel like might be the obvious follow up from someone like that is where do you begin something like that? How do you begin that process? What should people start thinking about if they want to implement their own studies and they want to start making their own plans in that regard?
Just develop a kind of a good game plan for how they want to move forward.
Hmm.
Um, and I read the textbooks, read the papers, go to conferences like this upcoming SWANA conference.
Like
There's a lot
Archon,
of good
exactly.
practitioners there that can tell you a little bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly. As far as what do you need to do to implement, and what are some lessons learned?
And also, I think for any potential, young professionals just coming up and deciding that this is a field that they want to, kind of dive into, hopefully not physically, but, professionally, what do you think would be a good basis of knowledge, any types of skills, or maybe even things that young people might not realize, that any types of skills or knowledge bases they may not realize that they need getting into waste to energy or solid waste reclamation or any type of field like this?
Well, it's SWANA does have a lot of students that
Oh yeah.
attend the conferences, and there are a lot of universities that have programs that they go through these like you know, design studies, where model design studies that they actually compete against each other. It's really kind of interesting to see, some of these young folks that are doing that stuff. But getting into the industry is, read a lot, go on the internet and look for other materials that are out there. Look for courses. There are a lot of universities that do have solid waste management courses.
Hopefully they're using your textbooks. But the last thing I want to kind of touch on is just where you think the industry is headed. We've talked a lot about where, a lot about advice that you would give to young people, students, cities, uh, or even landfills looking to build engineering. We've talked a lot about your experience. Taking all of that into account, where do you think waste to energy is headed as a field? What do you think is the trajectory that this industry is on? Do you think it's on a clear upward trajectory? I feel like it is, but what do you think, sir?
I think it is. I don't think it's in all the states where landfilling costs are still pretty low. But in other states like Florida, like Texas, and Illinois and Minnesota and New York, there is a move to waste to energy. But even if a state's deciding or a community's deciding to do landfilling, it's using the best available technologies and use them wisely. Um, and the other thing is, that I see as a trend, a lot of the communities are actually, instead of doing a kind of a seat of the pants way of actually managing their system, they're doing what people term is solid waste rate studies, where they're actually analyzing their expenses and looking at their revenues, looking at their capital needs over a long term, and doing financial analysis.
So, are you excited for the future?
Oh, definitely. It'd be interesting to see where this industry is in the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, I think 20 or 30 years from now, we're going to see, well, a lot of things will have happened, certainly within the next 20 or 30 years. I would love to see the waste to energy impact on the American energy grid and kind of who winds up, kind of controlling that and how much we're actually taking advantage of landfill gas and this kind of newly thought of gold mine of landfill and I kind of as we sort of agreed upon resource reclamation center potential. Uh,
Definitely.
so I'm interested to see where it goes. The most of the rest of the world is already kind of racing toward that goal at this point. So yeah, let's touch base on this in 20 or 30 years and see how some of those predictions have panned out. What do you say, sir?
I definitely hope I'm around to see it.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly hope you are too. But I want to thank you one more time for joining us today and lending us your wealth of experience within this industry, sir. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And once again, congratulations on your award. You're going to be receiving it officially at SWANA's Archon again next month. The official dates, if you want to join us, November 12th through the 14th. That's when the exhibit hall is going to be open. Join us at the Greater Columbus Convention Center in Columbus, Ohio. There's going to be a ton of amazing stuff going on. But once again, congratulations, sir, and good luck in all of your future endeavors. And for those of you out there who, as a matter of fact, for those of you out there who might be interested in learning more, where would you point them, sir? I'll go ahead and point people toward you if they want to get in contact with you. Is there a way they can do that?
Oh, just definitely on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. All right, make sure to check out Dr. Rogoff on LinkedIn. First name spelled Marc. Dr. Marc Rogoff on LinkedIn. Make sure to check that out. And once you check that out, do make sure to check out everything that we have going on over at Diamond Scientific. Once again, an industry leader in gas analysis, instrumentation, and solutions. You can check them out online at diamondsci.com. That's diamondsci.com or you can even set up a personalized presentation just by calling 321-223-7500. Once again, I've been your host, Eric Provost, and we will see you back here next time on another brand new episode of Recyclist. Thank you.
Thank you.